Okay. All right, we're back. Whew, okay. The goldenrod's plumes were turning gray, and the ox-eyed daisy's yellow petals hung down from the crown centers. All this was hidden in the secret little hollow. From the house, Laura had seen nothing but grasses, and now from this hollow she could not see the house. The prairie seemed to be level, but it was not level. Laura asked Pa if there were lots of hollows on the prairie like this one, and he said there were. Are Indians in them? She almost whispered, and he said he didn't know, but there might be. She held tight to his hand, and Mary held to his other hand, and they looked at the Indians' camp. There were ashes where Indian campfires had been. There were holes in the ground where tent poles had been driven. Bones were scattered where Indian dogs had gnawed at them. And all along the sides of the hollow, Indian ponies had bitten the grasses short. Oh, there you can kind of see. They're looking at the stuff. They're finding all the stuff. Tracks of big moccasins and smaller moccasins were everywhere, and tracks of little bare toes. Now I'm going to stop there for a second because I'm not sure if you know what moccasins are. Moccasins are the little, well, they're whatever size the foot was, but they're like leather slipper shoes that Indians used to wear that were made out of deer skins. So that's what moccasins are. They're like kind of like slipper shoes. And over these tracks were tracks of rabbits and tracks of birds and wolves' tracks. Pa read the tracks for Mary and Laura. He showed them tracks of 2 middle-sized moccasins by the edge of the campfire's ashes. An Indian woman had squatted there, and she wore a leather skirt with fringes, and the tiny marks of the fringe were in the dust. The track of her toes inside the moccasins was deeper than the track of her heels, because she had leaned forward to stir something cooking in the pot. And then Pa picked up a smoke-blackened fork stick, and he said that the pot had hung from a stick laid across the top of 2 upright forked sticks. And he showed Mary and Laura the holes where the fork sticks had been driven into the ground, and then he told them to look at the bones around the campfire and tell him what had cooked in that pot. They looked, and they said, rabbit? That was right. The bones were rabbit bones. And suddenly Laura shouted, look, look! Something bright blue glittered in the dust. She picked it up. It was a beautiful blue bead. Laura shouted with joy. Then Mary saw a red bead, and Laura saw a green one, and they forgot everything but the beads. Pa helped them look, and they found white beads and brown beads and more red and blue beads. All that afternoon they hunted for beads in the dust of the Indian camp. Now and then Pa walked up to the edge of the hollow and looked toward home, and then he came back and helped them hunt for more beads. They looked all the ground over carefully, and when they couldn't find any more, it was almost sunset. Laura had a handful of beads, and so did Mary. Pa tied them carefully in his handkerchief, Laura's beads in one corner and Mary's beads in another corner, and he put the handkerchief in his pocket, and they started for home. The sun was low behind their backs when they came out of the hollow. Home was small and very far away, and Pa did not have his gun. Pa walked so swiftly that Laura could hardly keep up. She trotted as fast as she could, but the sun sank faster, and home seemed further away. The prairie seemed larger, and the wind ran over it, whispering something frightening. All the grasses shook as if they were scared. Then Pa turned around, and his blue eyes twinkled at Laura. He said, "Getting tired, little half-pint? It's a long way for little legs." He picked her up, big girl that she was, and he settled her safe against his shoulder. He took Mary by the hand, and so they all came home together. Supper was cooking on the fire, and Ma was setting the table, and baby Carrie played with little pieces of wood on the floor. Pa tossed the handkerchief to Ma. "I'm later than I meant, Caroline," he said, "but look what the girls found." He took the milk bucket and went quickly to bring Pet and Patty from their picket lines and to milk the cows. Ma untied the handkerchief and exclaimed at what she found. The beads were even prettier than they had been in the Indian camp. Laura stirred her beads with her finger and watched them sparkle and shine. "These are mine," she said. Then Mary said, "Carrie can have mine." Ma waited to hear what Laura would say, but Laura didn't want to say anything. She wanted to keep those pretty beads. Her chest felt all hot inside, and she wished with all her might that Mary wouldn't always be such a good little girl. But she couldn't let Mary be better than she was, so she said slowly, "Carrie can have mine too." "That's my unselfish good little girl," said Ma, and she poured Mary's beads into Mary's hands and Laura's into Laura's hands, and she said she would give them a thread to string the beads on. The beads would make a pretty necklace for Carrie to wear around her neck. Mary and Laura sat side by side on their bed, and they strung those pretty beads on the thread that Ma gave them. Each wet her end of the thread in her mouth and twisted it tightly, and then Mary put her end of the thread through the small hole in each of the beads, and Laura put her end through the beads one by one. They didn't say anything. Perhaps Mary felt sweet and good inside, but Laura didn't. She looked at Mary and she wanted to slap her, so she dared not look at Mary again. And I'm going to show you the picture. And there they are, stringing their beads onto the string. And Mary is all happy because she gave her beads to Carrie, but Laura was not happy. She didn't really want to give them away, but she did it because she knew it was the right thing to do, because Carrie didn't get to go on the adventure with them because she's too little. The beads made a beautiful string, and Carrie clapped her hands and laughed when she saw it. Then Ma tied it around Carrie's little neck, and it glittered there. Laura felt a little bit better. After all, her beads were not enough beads to make a whole string, and neither were Mary's, but together they made a whole string of beads for Carrie. When Carrie felt the beads on her neck, she grabbed at them. She was so little that she did not know any better than to break the string. So Ma untied it, and she put the beads away until Carrie should be old enough to wear them. And often, after that, Laura thought of those pretty beads, and she was still naughty enough to want those beads for herself. But it had been a wonderful day. She could always think about that long walk across the prairie and about all they had seen in the Indian camp. And that is the end of chapter 14. I wonder what will happen next. I hope you have a good day, and remember, Grandma loves you, and we'll read again soon.